Hi, Rachel. So you're making a slight conceptual error. When we toss the ball up into the air, we have this velocity, but we have this position function as well, which let's rewrite this. I like to write things with the leading exponent first. So in other words, negative 16t squared plus 24t plus 16. If you think about what we're doing here, we are tossing a ball up into the air, so it's going to have an immediate high positive velocity, right? It's rising up into the air, and then at a certain point, it's going to reach its peak and start falling. And when it reaches its peak, the velocity is 0. When it starts falling, the velocity becomes negative. So we don't want to find where the velocity is 0, because this would be finding the peak of basically the arc of our ball, right? Like if we draw this function, it looks something like that, where the velocity is positive right here, right? Because this is a positive slope. The velocity is 0 right here because it's flat, and then the velocity is negative here because it's falling down again. So what we want to solve for is not when the velocity is 0, but when the position function gives us 0. In other words, we want to find the zeros of this thing right here. Now, in order to factor this, we could try and factor it right away, but we notice that 8 goes into all of these terms. And if you factor out a constant, it doesn't actually change the intercepts or the zeros of the function. So we could factor out an 8 from each of these terms to get equivalently, or we should also factor out a negative 8, I should say, because we want this t squared to be positive. It makes factoring easier. So if we factor out a negative 8, we now have 2t squared minus 3t minus 2 equals 0. Okay, and now factoring this is pretty easy because we're just looking, we know the first term has to be a 2t, so we know this has to be 2t, and over here this has to be 1t, because these are the only two things that can really multiply to give us 2t squared. We know one of these terms has to be a negative 2 because of the same reason, so we'll put the negative 2 over here. This is me just kind of guessing, by the way. We can just sort of, you could probably do this by just factoring by grouping as well, but this is easy enough to guess with. So we get this, and then this last term has to be a plus 1 because we need that to multiply to give us negative 2. So plus 1. In other words, positive 1 times negative 2 gives us negative 2. All right, so, plus 1. So this is all equal to 0, and now we solve the points. So we take this and set this to 0, so 2t plus 1 equals 0, and we take this over here and set it to 0, so t minus 2 equals 0. So over here, we just add 2 to both sides to get t equals 2. All right, so that's one of our zeros. And then over here, we subtract 1 from both sides and then divide by 2 to get t equals negative 1/2. Now the question is, which one of these is when the ball hits the ground? Well, you can't have a negative time, so this doesn't make sense conceptually. And over here, you can have a positive time, so this would make sense as our answer. This also makes sense because if you have a negative time, what this kind of implies is that we have an immediate velocity. We've kind of already given it a velocity. We've tossed it into the air. So there's no place where the ball is at 0, where the ball is at the ground before it rises and then falls again. So here, how long does it take in seconds for the ball to get back to the platform? 2 seconds. Okay, I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and have a good rest of your day.